5 men in suits walk through the front doors of a small town post office. Tony O'Reilly sees them on the security camera and his heart sinks. For months, he's been living a double life, a respected post office manager by day and one of Paddy Power's biggest gamblers by night. Inside the safe, a €1.7 million black hole. Tony runs to the bathroom and vomits. He texts his wife one line, "I'm sorry for everything." Tony O'Reilly grew up in rural Ireland. Shy, quiet, not many friends, no real interest in gambling. He'd watched his uncle place tiny bets on horse and greyhound races, but thought it was mad to waste money on a 20-second race. Gambling just wasn't in his DNA. That was until one day in 2003. At 24 years old, everything changed. He walked into a local bookies for the very first time and was going to place a €1 bet on Patrick Kluivert to score first, with the odds being 7-1. Tony turned to his friend and said, "There's a 45-1 odds that Patrick Kluivert scores first and the Netherlands beat Argentina 2-1. Tony decided to place his €1 on the 45-1 odds, and with the game tied 1-1 in the 89th minute, and Patrick Kluivert having scored the first goal, Dennis Bergkamp scored the winner for the Netherlands. The Netherlands won 2-1 and Tony won £45. He described the feeling as electric, the rush of beating the system, the high of turning €1 into something more. That night he went out drinking, and when he rolled into bed that night, he thought, this is easy money. He was wrong. Over the next 5 years, Tony's gambling slowly escalated. €1 became €5, €5 became €10, €10 became 50, and he started waking up in the middle of the night to place bets. It wasn't about the sport anymore, it was about the rush. Then came the bet that Tony said changed everything. The Europa League final, 2005. CSKA Moscow versus Sporting Lisbon. Tony put €50 on 2 soccer games, that one and the playoff final, and ended up winning back nearly €5,000. But instead of celebrating, he was furious with himself for not betting more. He withdrew $2,000 and left $3,000 in his online account, and over the next few weeks blew through it all. Now he's betting €100, €200 at a time. And once you've tasted the high of €5,000 win, it's very hard to go back to betting €10 on a small soccer game. By 2007, Tony was €25,000 in debt. 2 weeks before his wedding, he needed $6,000 to pay for it, and the bank had rejected his loan. He sold personal belongings to raise cash, but he didn't have enough. At the wedding, 80 guests gave generous cash gifts, with over €6,000 collected in total, and Tony could finally breathe. But the addiction wasn't done. The week of the wedding, Tony locked himself in a hotel room and gambled for days. He lost thousands, and then in a panic, put €2,000 on a horse race to try win it back, and lost. 2 days after the wedding, he put his last €2,500 on a horse, and it won. Just enough to cover the wedding. No one suspected a thing, but behind the smile, the trap was tightening. 2 years later, Tony was €45,000 in debt. He landed a big job managing a post office, with daily access to cash, cheques, and government funds. His wife came home one day with news. She was pregnant, but her maternity pay was only €100 per week. Tony had a mortgage, bills, and a child on the way, while drowning in debt, still gambling every day, and the stress made him physically sick every single morning. Under the weight of all this pressure, Tony turned to alcohol, and then made a decision that would change everything. He started stealing from the post office. At first, it was small. A few €100 slipped from the cash bag, but when the government started sending €50,000 bags of cash for welfare funds, Tony's ears perked up. He would gently slice the corner and use pliers to remove a few notes, seal it back up, and push it to the back of the safe. Audits came every 6 months, and the first one missed the $8,000 he'd stolen. 2 months later, after his daughter was born, Tony had stolen €68,000. His daughter's birth, which again should have been the happiest day of his life, was overshadowed by the crushing weight of his addiction. 3 months later, that number had risen to €293,000. At this point, he wasn't just stealing cash from the bags and putting it to the back of the safe, he was now forging checks, adding and removing zeros and pocketing the difference. Tony wasn't just gambling, he was embezzling at scale. Over the next 6 months, Tony stole another 1.4 million euros from the post office. He was betting crazy money on everything, from Azerbaijani soccer to netball in Peru, completely random events. One of his biggest bets when he bet 40,000 euros on the Norwegian women's football team, and he ended up losing. Paddy Power ended up saying that some days Tony bet more than all of their other customers combined, and in total, over his gambling career he won 9 million euros, but lost 10.5 million euros. On his best weekend, he turned over 476,000 euros in profit, and by Monday night at 10 p.m, every single cent was gone. Tony kept digging a deeper and deeper hole and spent 18 hours a day checking the odds, placing bets in bathrooms. He spent so long in the bathroom he had to pretend he had diarrhea to hide it from his wife. He stopped caring about the games at this point. It was pure compulsion. June 29th, 2011. The auditors arrive. This time, they're thorough. 1.7 million euros is missing. He drives from Wexford in Ireland to Belfast in the UK. He throws his phone out the window on the way and disappears. Tony at this point only has 600 euros in cash to his name. He walks into a Ladbrokes bookies and gambles it. He checks into a hotel under a fake name, and meanwhile, back home, his wife collapses when she's told the news. Police and family scour beaches and mountains fearing he's dead. The newspapers plaster his face everywhere. And one day, he wakes up at 1 p.m. after a night of heavy drinking, wanders to the bookies and places what would be his last bet. £100 on a horse. And he loses. Then he opens up the newspaper to see himself on the front page. And before we finish Tony's story, it's important to understand that gambling is not just entertainment, it's a business, a very calculated, profitable business. Tony once got a call from the owner of Paddy Power. The company's systems were down and he gave Tony his personal number to continue betting. That's how valuable he was. The owner of a 40 billion euro company giving Tony his personal number in case he wanted to do a bet. Tony wasn't just a customer, he was an asset to Paddy Power and all other bookies. 4 days after disappearing, the police storm Tony's hotel room in Belfast. He collapses to the floor and confesses everything. Tony was arrested, charged, interviewed, had his home searched, and put into rehab. After rehab, he's arrested and faces 5 to 7 years in prison. But the judge recognised that he didn't profit. He was consumed by addiction and was only sentenced to 3 years. Paddy Power also allegedly covered the 1.7 million euro loss to the post office. Tony's time in prison matured him a lot. The jig was up, and he felt so much better. A weight was lifted off his shoulders. But today, Tony has lost his house, his marriage, and still is paying off the debt. However, he's used this for a force of good. He travels to 50 schools a year, sharing his story to educate young people about gambling addiction. And he rarely gets urges now. He says an alcoholic can't drink their way out of a problem, but a gambler will always think they're just one win away from making it all back. So Tony's story isn't just about addiction. It's about how business models exploit human weakness. How one man's life spiraled from a €1 bet to a 1.7 million euro crime. If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe as we break down real stories every week.